Hello y'all, I'm Shayna Cersei. I'm so excited to paint with you today. Today we are going to be doing another folk art inspired landscape scene that you all love out there. We're going to be doing a nighttime scene today. So using some really a dark color palette with lots of saturated colors. And don't forget to check out the description for the list of supplies that we use and links to other supplies that I use daily, as well as links to my social media and the Studio Crew classroom. But to go over what we're going to be using today, I have my B watercolor paper sketchbook. This is my very last page in this sketchbook. So I'm sad about that, but I'm gonna see if I can get some more of these. And then this is the 8x8 size 140-pound cold press. And I'm going to be using my core watercolor palette. This has a variety of colors in it. I'll go over which ones I'll be using. And then I have some water here. And then I also have a Princeton Select size 12 and size 6 round brushes that I'll use today. And I think that's it. Some paper towel and a kneaded eraser as well. As always, if you want the outline to this, you can always become a Studio Crew member and get the outlines or draw your own version of this. But here is the outline we're going to be using. I'm just going to lighten it up just a little bit. We are going to be using pretty dark colors, but so most of the pencil lines won't show through necessarily. So just lightening it up ever so slightly. All right, we're gonna start with our sky on this one. Start with our sky, probably work on our hills here. And I'm gonna put in the glow for our windows, then our bushes and trees and our moon, and lastly some bleed proof white accents and some darker accents on there as well. So let's get started with our sky. All right, so starting on the sky, we are going to use, I'm going to use Ultramarine and a little, so here's my Ultramarine and Payne's Gray. Just going to pull a bunch of this out because I want enough to get the whole sky in. And I already pre-wet my palette. I sprayed it and I actually got a little spray on here. So I'm hoping that doesn't affect what I have going on later. So I already swatched out some of my colors here, but let me show you for Ultramarine and the Payne's Gray. It gives us this beautiful dark blue navy color. And Ultramarine is a granulating color, so I am counting on it giving me some fun and funky textures in the sky. So just mixing those two up, adding a little bit of water so we have some flow. And we're going to do the sky first. And I'm actually going to, so I have a house here, a tree here, and a moon. The moon is really important that we get around that. So I'm going to start with lots of water and lots of paint on my brush. Okay, and I'm going to start moving around this way. And I'm going to generously pick up lots of paint and water on my brush each time. And adding that to my painting and just work my way around. I can always add more layers. Sorry, I'm concentrating really hard. More layers. I don't necessarily need this to be a perfectly smooth, even wash. It can have some texture in the sky, especially around the moon where things are glowing. I just don't want any hard edges except around objects. So I don't want this edge to become hard while it waits for me. So you want to make sure your brush is nice and juicy, and that when you're putting that line down, that edge is very wet. Now I'm going to work around this little house here. This will be the hardest part to work quickly and efficiently. And of course, you can always mask areas out if you prefer to work that way and mask out your house. The tree, I'm not going to worry about it being a, you know, perfect shape. It's an organic shape. So if I mess it up, just change the shape of the tree. Right, working around this house here. And around this part of the tree here. Picking up, again, water and paint very generously. Work in that shape. And then last but not least, this area around here, around the corner. Don't worry about, go right off the tape. Finally got some skinny masking tape. There we go. And just make sure you have all of your different areas kind of covered. There's some nooks and crannies in here. And we're gonna let that completely dry. I can already see I'm gonna have some funky drying right here. I'm totally okay with it. I kind of enjoy this idea of some texture in the sky. And we'll see what we get. If it really bothers me, I can always go back over it with another layer, but I think it's gonna be pretty cool. All right, so let's go and move on to our ground area. So for the color of the ground, I'm actually going to be using Viridian, Sap Green, and Payne's Gray. So the Viridian and the Sap Green, the Viridian's going to cool down the Sap Green quite a bit. And then the Payne's Gray is going to deepen the color. And we're going for this really dark, like hunter green kind of color here. You can barely see that that's green. It almost looks black, but if I add water to it, you can see that it's green there. And we really want this really dark green color that also is a little desaturated because it's nighttime and things are dark and desaturated at night. So I'm going to put this on here on this edge, but then I am going to take my brush and rinse it and blend it out. I want some areas to be lighter. And let the watercolor do what the watercolor does. There we go. And then I have this other one here. I will let this one dry. I'm gonna add this one in. And again, I'm gonna go darker towards the bottom between the houses here. And then I am going to rinse my brush a bit and blend this out. Rinse my brush and blend towards the top. Go. And I'm just turning my paper so I can kind of get in here. I'm going to get into these nooks around the house. There we go. And then just blend this out so we have a nice fun gradient there. And then once these two dry, I'll go ahead and I'll put in this other one. Again, I'll start darker towards the bottom and get lighter as we go towards the top, and it'll create that natural separation. So let's let those dry, and then we'll put in this last section, and then we can concentrate on our bushes that we have to put in, our trees, and then we'll work on houses. All right, so let's get in this last little, we've let those dry. We're gonna go trees next after we put this in, but we're going to be using purple for our trees, this bluish purple. So that's kind of a little fanciful, a little whimsical, not an ordinary color for trees, but it still works in a nighttime landscape. It's a dark color, and it kind of goes with our theme here. All right, so let's get in this last, let me make a little more of this color. add a little more water to it. All right, so here we go. We're gonna put in this last, I'm gonna go around my bush here, and then also around the edge of my other hill. And blend up. Getting all those little white spots in there, not leaving any white edges really in this particular design or piece. All right, so we have our 3 little hills here. I don't want any of those little splotchy water droplets to kind of sit on there, or they will dry funny. Let me put in a little bit more here before I let this sit and dry. Blend it all the way up. There we go. Okay, so now I'm not going to touch that, and I'm going to work on my bushes. So we're going to start with this one up here. So I used Dioxazine Purple, and then I added some of my Ultramarine to it to make this really blue purple color. Very dark, lovely saturation. And I'm going to do this, I'm going to go along the side of my house roof here, and along the edge of my hill and sky. Rinse my brush off similarly to how I did, oh, I just got a big droplet of water on there by accident, but similar to how I did the grass. We're gonna blend it up. So working on your gradients and your ability to do a soft blend. So you can see it's lighter at the top where the moon is like shining some light on it. All right, tree, I'm gonna do the same, but I'm gonna lighten this up a little bit, just with a little water. And my tree is gonna be darkest on the bottom. Don't worry about the branches inside the tree and the trunk. We're gonna paint those in white, actually later on, bleed-proof white. Go around the tree here. It's going to be darkest on the bottom and on the side here, and the side facing the moon is going to be the lightest. And just blend this out to the edge. Add in some more paint because I don't want it to be too light up here. There we go. Lovely, lovely, lovely. And we do have one little bush right down here, and I think we're dry enough there. Let me make a little bit more of this. Purple, ultramarine. I'm running out of ultramarine. Got to replace that in the palette. And it's not a color I use that often. All right, this one down front I'm going to make really nice and dark. Just a little lightness on the top. All right, beautiful. So any of these areas after they dry, if you feel like they need another layer of paint to deepen it or darken the color, absolutely, especially when doing a nighttime scene and you really want things to be dark and saturated. Especially if you're also using student grade quality paints, Often you'll have to do a second layer, and that's fine. It's just because there's less pigment in student grade paints or craft grade paints than professional paints. So sometimes I can get away with one layer where you might have to do two depending on your paints. There we go. Okay. Oh, I do have one more bush over here that I totally did not see or forgot about. I'm gonna do this one in purple as well. Rinsing off my brush and just blend. And I got a little bit down here, which I wasn't intending to do. I can take it out, but it also kind of made like a nice little shadow. But we'll just take it out for now. All right, so we're done with that, and now we have to work on our houses and our moon. Our sky is pretty dry, and this granulating color has made some spooky, cool texture in that sky, and I actually really love it. So hooray for granulating paint when it does what you want it to do. So let's do the houses. So the first thing with the houses though is we're gonna have to paint in the yellow, the warm yellow glow. So I'm using a Gamboge yellow or a Diarylide yellow. This is Diarylide yellow. To make the glowy window. Now my water is really purple from what I just did, and purple and yellow make brown. So I need to either clean my water out, or I'm just gonna pick up some new paint, brand new paint. There we go. That's bright enough for me. All right, so we're gonna take this yellow, and I'm actually just gonna paint it into my windows. So I'm still using my size 12 brush, but this would be a good time to switch if you wanted to your size 6 or 4 or just a smaller size. I'm actually going to do that now for my other windows because they're even smaller. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to put some yellow on these little windows all the way in the back, and then right up here in front. And this can be lighter. If you want it to be lighter, you can pull out color kind of right in the middle to give it like a brighter glow in the center versus the edges. And this will be more apparent when we put on the frame, so the window panes, when we put them in there, it'll appear more glowy. All right, so we have that down. We're gonna put on our roofs while we wait for that to dry before we can get into our houses. So we're gonna use a dark brown for that. I have a burnt umber, or I'm sorry, a raw umber here. And I'm gonna mix that just on my palette with the yellow. You don't have to mix it with your yellow. I just wanted to use this space up. And I'm also gonna add a little Payne's gray to it to darken it even more. But I don't want it to be black. I do want it to be a brown. And I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna work right along my roof, filling in all these little white gaps. I have a little white gap above that doesn't quite make a straight line from where I was painting my blue. I'm just gonna widen my roof. So I'm gonna make it a little thicker to fill that gap. And I'm gonna do this one as well. And then our houses are going to be white, or we want them to translate as white. But we are gonna have to add some shadows onto them because at night they do not appear white. So let's just turn this to the side so my hand isn't running right through. And I made all these houses kind of very similar, the same, this quintessential, you know, white A-frame, not A-frame, but the roof is like this A-frame roof. And then this is a long, wide roof over here. And you can always go back and add white details later on with bleed proof white if you want to. All right, so my brown roofs are in. We're gonna let that dry and then add in our grays for the shadows on the houses themselves. But let's get into our moon and some of our bleed proof white details. All right, so the moon, we're just going to add water to our circular moon. And then Payne's gray, I've run out of space kind of on my palette here. Let's clean this side off. You would think I would prepare ahead of time and have a nice clean palette, but no. This is how I actually work. All right, so a little Payne's gray, lots and lots of water, nice and light. And we are just going to add some moon texture. It does not have to be around the whole thing. You can leave white spots. I'm gonna get a little bit darker. Just 1 or 2 spots right around the bottom. Moon texture is so fun because you can really play with it and kind of make it yours. And it's different every time. You could add color to it, add a little bit of yellow, keep it gray, add a little purple if you wanted to. But I'm just gonna leave it like that. I'm gonna let it dry. It's gonna be much lighter in the long run. And I think I will be happy with it. I tend to go a little darker on this stage because I know it's gonna lighten up. There we go. All right, so again, we still have to get into our houses, but let's get into bleed proof white. So let's go grab your PH Martin bleed proof white if you have it. If you don't, some gouache, and last resort would be some acrylic paint. But I highly recommend this bleed proof white to get a jar of this. It'll last you a really long time and you'll use it for a lot of things if you like painting in this style. All right, so I have my bleed proof white. I am going to, you can pull a little bit out. I'm gonna put it in my cap. It's a terrible idea. So the cap of this, and just add a little bit of water to it just to get a nice flow, but I don't really wanna dilute it. Putting it in the cap is a terrible idea because I always forget to clean it out, and then I put it back on my jar, and then eventually my cap gets stuck on my jar. So just keep that in mind if you're mixing in the cap. All right, so I'm gonna put in the branches of the tree. So the trunk of the tree is actually going to be white as well, which I just left it white, but I got a little paint in there. So I'm just gonna go over it with bleed proof white to make it all uniform. And then from here, I am going to take my branches up into my tree, and they're gonna get thinner as they go up. And smaller as they come off each other. And they have this kind of graceful swooping to them. I think it's important to remember that all branches don't start from the same spot. Okay, I hope my head wasn't in the way for that. So branches lead off of branches, lead off of branches. So I'm not gonna start like a whole bunch all from this one spot. And I have to move my palette over because I'm literally resting my arm on top of it. So instead of starting from here again, from the same spot, I'll go up a little higher, and I would start a branch a little bit higher, and then do a branch, off a branch, off a branch, off a branch. Okay. So that is good for my tree over there. Now you can add, and I might just stick to the tree for branches, you could add this same kind of texture into the bushes as well. I think I'm just gonna add some other white details to the foreground here, like other branches and twigs and like leaves maybe. Just to give it another white kind of detail up here. But not necessarily right in the bush, maybe over top of the bush. Everything kind of has, so the tree is kind of swooping this way and all of these are kind of swooping this way. I kind of like that balance. My kids are watching The Office in the background. 2 rooms over, but you can still hear it. So I hope you're not hearing The Office as well as my teaching. Okay, so we're gonna leave that. I think that's enough. You can go crazy. You can go do as much of this or as little of this as you want. Put another one in here. Just balance out these leaves. Okay. I absolutely love this guy. I love the texture. I'm a big fan. Big fan. All right, so let's finish up with our houses and then we will be done. Okay, so with the houses, they are gonna have, at night, white is gonna have a grayness to it. So let's start with this one back here. This will probably be the most gray. It's the furthest away. It's going to, I'm putting a light gray under the eave here, and then I'm gonna blend it out. It can be lighter towards the window where light is being cast on the window. But this one is gonna be pretty gray in the background. And then we are gonna put the window frames on and they are going to be brown. But we'll do that after that dries. So for this one up front, under the eave here is gonna be the darkest. And then I am going to blend this out, rinsing off my brush. Again, I'm gonna want this to be darkest under there, and then, oops. You can see I'm adding lots and lots of water to my gray, and then I'm gonna add just a little bit more shadow under the eaves and under the windowsill there. Okay, and then I'm just gonna let that dry. And same thing over here. It's going to be gray. So light wash of gray, and then right under the eave and under the windowsill, I'm going to give it a little bit more shadow. And then this one in the background here, I'm going to make it even a little darker. Because it's so far back there, it really should be darker. All right, so let's let these dry and then finish up with our window panes. So we're going to give them a sill around the window in brown and then do our cross panes. All right, so everything is dry now, and our last detail is putting on the windows. Now I'm going to use the same brown I used for the roof. So you can see that back in frame here. Just reactivate that. I'm using my smaller brush. If you need an even smaller brush, go for it. I'm going to get way up on the tip of my brush. So tiny tip, and I'm just going to outline these frames. So give it a window frame, and then the panes. And you can see when you put this darker contrast on, it helps that light glow inside there. Go. And let me turn my brush around, or my painting around. And do these little tiny ones way in the background. And then if you want, you can even like thicken the one on the bottom and on the top. You know, basically give your window frames a little personality. You could give them shutters if you wanted to. I'm going to do on the bottom and the top. There we go. And then I'm even going to go in, and this is where you could go in and add a little bit more shadow. Add a little shadow here, and I'm going to add a little shadow on the underside here. Just to give these a little bit more realism, not so flat. So where these two houses or these two buildings kind of meet, giving that a little bit more there. And then just under the eave here and on the corner of the building. And underneath my window. And then you are done. Until you are done playing with kind of all of the different shading and shadows, you can keep going and going and going. And I could even like darken the corners of the windows if you want, and make it like super bright in the center. You could put shadows in the windows to make it look like there are things or objects or people inside. So I darken the corner so it looks like that really bright glow right in the center there. And then we're done. So I hope you enjoyed this one. Let's take off the tape. I'm gonna have to warm up the tape with my heat gun because we're working on bee paper here, and I'm using masking tape, and masking tape and bee paper do not get along. All right, and there we have it, our folk art inspired nighttime landscape scene. We did this all in pretty much cool colors with the exception of our yellow, but these beautiful green, purples, and blues with our bright moon in the sky. And then look at this really cool texture that we got with I love this that's happening here, and I just kind of let it do its thing, but that granulating ultramarine really was a showstopper here in that sky. So I love that part of it. So thank you so much. I'm Shayna Cersei. It's always a pleasure painting with you. Don't forget to check out the description, like and comment on this video, and happy painting, y'all.